Good morning. I'm conscious there's a lot of people here. Do you want to come in? Because the acoustics there are rubbish, so why don't you come in? And I feel guilty that you're all standing up, but if I ask you to sit down, I'll be accused of organising a sit-in protest, so I can't win, can I? But come in, and you might want to move forward if you want to read the slides. What I want to talk to you about this morning is a programme that we've put together over the last 5 years, and we've slowly honed it down. But it's a programme that's been set up for the purposes of creating graduate entrepreneurs, and I'll explain what the thinking is behind that. But I thought it's interesting that I put up a slide which gives you some idea of what we've been doing for the last 22 years, and particularly the last decade. We've invested, as you can see, £579 million in various ventures. So far to date, that has yielded a return of $3.3 billion in profits, and we still have 28 companies left in the stable to effectively realise value from. So I suppose my argument is it does seem to work if you get it right. And if you look at what we've been doing, we're doing it against quite a challenging backdrop, as I think everyone would acknowledge. We have very few indigenous technology companies in our nation that have reached a critical mass. And we could talk about that all morning, but I won't. We need more quality situations for our young graduates to move into. There's definitely an absence of capital at the moment in the marketplace to exploit ideas. A few colleagues who are with me here today, I know I've seen Ian here and Mark Barry as well, and we worked on a report for the Welsh Assembly Government on the commercialisation of IP in higher education, and I think the conclusions of that were quite clear, that we don't do it well enough and we could do it a lot better. And really, we're all about wanting to create more quality employment within the region. So our aims are quite simply, at Alacrity, which is the name of the programme, to prepare grads for entrepreneurship, to provide mentoring and applied R&D, to align graduates and young people with global opportunities, and we hope that this is a precursor to building these critical mass tech companies that we need in the region. But you might sit there and say, why would we want to do graduate startups? Well, I would just invite you to look at the world's most valuable companies and the fastest growing companies, and they do have a common theme about them. They're started by young graduates. Who would have thought that Google would have been worth more than General Motors 10 years ago? Or companies like Facebook would be racing up the value chain. And what you find with these graduates when you properly deploy them is most of them are not married, most of them have no children, most of them have zero commitments, and most of them can work around the clock if they need to get a product out. And it's no surprise that some of the world's most exciting companies are driven by these young people. Now, before you all switch off and say, well, my business isn't about graduates, I would just invite you to be conscious of what I say, because we have changed the way we invest over the last 10 years, 22 years in all. And I think if you compare us in a world ranking, Wesley Clover's the 9th most successful venture fund in the world. And we used to do things the conventional method, which I'll talk about, and we have changed it. And in changing it, we have applied principles which I think apply to companies, whether they're the size of, $1 billion in sales, or whether they're the size of 100,000 in sales. And I think there are consistent themes of success, which I hope come out of this presentation today. So we've been operating this system now of graduate entrepreneurship for 4 years, and we've been taking graduates from the UK, Canada, France, and the US. And we work with universities who provide scouts to identify the right type of people, and these aren't necessarily people that have a first. Sometimes these are, we're looking for highly motivated people who can communicate, who are intelligent, but nonetheless, they're a special package of individual. One thing I've got to tell you is that you imagine we took some guys from Cardiff, Bristol, and Swansea universities, and we sent them to Canada. But what they didn't realise was they were going to live with Terry Matthews. And they live in his house. That's the level of commitment that they have to endure. And I can tell you, you don't want to get home at 8 o'clock at night in Terry's house. And on Saturday morning, you don't want to be in bed at 10 o'clock in the morning lazing around, because he does tend to motivate you to get out and do some work. But I can think of a few programs where you'd be immersed with that kind of a commitment from the people involved in it. We put the guys into this boot camp, which effectively operates for about a year. And this is interesting. This is kind of almost like the Dragon's Den model of venture capital, and it's existed for 100 years. You know, you hear about people wanting to create a dream team. Develop a big idea, raise venture capital to fund it, and then hire bright young people to assist in making it a success. That's the classic model. And when you think about it, it's often a supply model. You come up with an idea, you raise your money, you go away and you develop it with an expectation, perhaps, that you may sell it in the future. We've completely abandoned that model, and we've gone to a complete demand-driven model, which I'll explain. But look what we've done. We've flipped it on its head. We select grads right from the start to set up the company. We assume the best idea is not in their heads, but in the channel, in the distribution channel where the customers are. So when we ask graduates to come into our program, we're not asking them to come into the program with a business idea. We know where the good ideas are, and the best ideas are the ones where people say, if you build it, I'll buy it. And not only will I buy it, I'll commit to it with an order. It's a demand-driven model, and it's quite different. Because of that, from the moment the company incorporates, they're getting sales almost. And if they're getting sales, they're generating cash. And if they're generating cash, they get to cash flow break even quicker, which means they don't have to rely on external financing so much as before. Because there are too many good companies who start up, have a great idea, create a product, run out of cash, and then spend the next year trying to raise cash. They get another year of cash, and then after that year they run out of cash, and they spend another year trying to raise cash. Too many ideas are stalling for the need for venture capital. With this model, we get them to self-fund themselves as quickly as possible. And then we hire grey-haired people when the company gets into revenue. And we teach the graduates that bringing in a senior person to help execute the idea is actually a virtuous thing, and they should consider that a sign of success, not a sign of failure. And you can see that in Google. You know, Google brought in Eric Schmidt to stabilize the ship. Now Eric Schmidt stepped aside because the Google guys are comfortable enough, they feel they can run the company. So this is a question that I get asked a lot. How do you pick a winner? And when Dr. Kim Clark was in Cardiff a few years ago, he's the Dean of Harvard Business School, he looked at our track record and he asked me exactly the same question. What's the secret of the recipe? How do you pick a winner? And I said to him, at startup, you can't run an analysis through a spreadsheet. And if you do, they're worthless, typically. The best way to identify a winner is a sensory perception. It's driven by your head, your heart, and your gut. Your head will tell you about the validity of the idea. Your heart will tell you about the quality of the people, and your gut should tell you about the marketplace. If those three things align, keep talking. If they're out of alignment, there's a problem. Now, I would put a caveat in here and say that the only exception to that is the idea. We have met loads of people who have got wonky ideas, but they're good people and the market is good. So all you need to do is reorientate the idea to the other two, and you can win. But I can tell you, if you've got the wrong people, or you're trying to pursue a deficit type of a market, you're not going to have a success. And so, you know, we've stuck to this head, heart, and gut the whole time, and it's served us well. We source our ideas, as you can imagine, from mainly talking to customers, from R&D departments within our university partners, from interpreting market intelligence, and obviously talking to new grads. And what's good about working with new grads is they don't see things the way we see them. IBM never thought of Google. Microsoft never thought of Facebook. The reason that those things happen is because these young people design on a blank canvas. And in our startup model, we're amazed at the way young people look at ideas, and we've missed it for years. We've missed it for we've got a rocket ship of a company in Canada called Ben Bria that does mass notification systems. Well, when they started to look at mass notification systems, the first place to start is in the ceiling. And they looked at loudspeakers, we call them tannoys or public address systems. And they're still installing them today on separate networks. And these kids look up and they said, it's stupid. And we say, well, that's what it is. And they say, no, it's stupid. Because if it was on an IP network, every single speaker would be individually addressable, and every single speaker could also be in an emergency switched to a two-way device. And then they added in application servers to communicate with phones, televisions, computer systems, and they've got an absolute rocket ship of a company now. We typically take the graduates, we cook them in the boot camp for about 12 months, and we empower them with skills that they are not taught at university. And some of them come to us also with an MBA, and we still have to instill simple business things which shamefully the MBA programs and the business schools don't teach. Let me give you an example. You can do an MBA at the best schools in the world, and they will teach you marketing, but they will never teach you how to sell. Now, how stupid is that? Because I ran marketing at Newbridge Networks, and I was also running marketing for a few years at Mitel in Europe. But at Newbridge, I ran global marketing for the entire corporation, and as you know, it had a 2 billion run rate at the end. And I always believed that marketing existed to serve sales, not the other way around. And I think it's remarkable that we're pumping out graduates from business school who have never been taught to sell. Now, we've been banging on about this for some time, and I think it's fascinating now that the University of British Columbia have just appointed a chair of sales. Stanford University have just appointed a chair of sales. Perhaps there's a wind of change from the graduates themselves who want to be better prepared for business. And if you want a differentiator, I would suggest in the UK at a business school, I would appoint a chair of sales, because then you're offering students something that's a major element of the business world that they're not currently being given.